Welcome to Justice Now, and you're part of the Tips for Black Workers series. This is part 27, and that is disruption of your work career. Disruption of your work career. Um, Depending on how you identify um, as Black Canadian, Canadian, African Canadian, um, it's going to also impact how you're able to access resources such as employment and how long you're able to stay in employment status. So I'm just reviewing an article from Merland Pierre dated April 9th, 2019. And the article is called Promoting the Full Participation of Black Communities Will Help Legitimize Our Democracy for a More Just and Equitable Society. So this is, the text was written in context of the United Nations 2015 to 2024 International Decade for People of African Descent. I'm not quite sure if many of you have known that United Nations has dedicated a decade, an international decade for people of African descent, which ends in 2024 and started in 2015. I didn't know about this until 2019. That shows how promoted this thing is. So it says, over the past 20 years, the Black Canadian population has doubled in size from 573,860 in 1996 to 1,198,540 in 2016. Black Canadians now represent more than 3.5% of the Canadian population and 15.6% of the visible minority or racialized population. According to Statistics Canada, the black population will continue to grow, and it could represent between 5% and 5.6% of the Canadian population by 2036. One of the peculiarities of the Black communities in Quebec and Canada is that they tend to be disproportionately young population. Indeed, in 2016, the median age for Black population was 29.6 years, while it was 40.7 years of the general population. So just to go back to at one point back in 2010, 2011, Black population at that time was only 2.9%. So the fact that it's increased by 6.6% is interesting. So they're talking about this population group. However, Black Canadians, including young people, generally face above average unemployment. The unemployment rate for Black Canadians is around 12%. So if we're 3.5% of the total Canadian population and 15.6% of the visible minority or racialized populations, our unemployment is at 12%. That means that there's something systemically going on. It does not mean that, contrary to what others would like to believe, that Black people are uneducated, because Black people are educated under the Canadian school system when living in Canada. It's not a matter of Black people not wanting to work. They're certainly wanting to work, but if you're 15.6% of the visible minority or racialized population, but unemployment is 12%, right? There's something going on there. There's something going on there. And that means that Black people in this, according to this ratio, are being blocked from employment opportunities. That's what's going on. They're being blocked. And oftentimes, which is really also interesting, oftentimes Black Canadians, even if they're multi-generational or 1 to 2 generations in on being Canadian, are often regulated to immigrant status. And immigrant status meaning that they are not considered as fully Canadian despite their birth certificate stating that they're naturalized Canadian. So that's also another thing. I also noticed that when I went to interviews, they'll often use that 2 years. You need an additional 2 years to be up to what we're looking for type of spiel, the similar type of information they would give immigrants who've just come to Canada. And, followed by, where are you from? And when you say Canada, somehow Canada is not enough. But I digress. So going back to this 12% of above average unemployment, that's dedication to white supremacy, right? Majority of those who are in human resources, majority of those are white people that are in those positions. Then there are other racialized groups, such as Asians, East Asians, South Asians, that occupy quite a number of those jobs as well. So there is a certain degree of anti-Black sentiment that goes on as well, in which young Black people are not being employed. Then you have quite a bit of young Black people who are very smart, very intelligent in the field that they are in, and they are being used as placeholders. This is going to lead into the disruption of one's career and how this occurs over and over. So what happens is you show that you are exceptional at doing the job that you do, and rather than give you that full-time spot, they will have you go in either as a contract basis, or they will have you doing work but not paying you for it that is outside of your roles and responsibilities according to the job, right? And sometimes they'll make it seem as if they're doing you a favor by giving you this quote unquote opportunity, but they're not willing to pay you for it. And on the performance review, they're not willing to put down the additional things that you have been doing in order to help advance the company that they work in. And then going back to placeholders, they will typically hold a Black worker there long enough until they can get another worker who's not Black to fill in that position. And then lo and behold, all of a sudden, your skills are devalued, so much so that, it's to justify you not getting stable employment. But you are being told that you got to train the replacement, right? We all know what that is. That's deception, that's lies, that's stealing careers from others, right? That's stealing careers from Black people. That's stealing job security from Black people. And that's why the unemployment is at 12%. Like, take that in. 15.6% of the visible minority or racialized population, 3.5% of the total Canadian population, 12% unemployment. Also, just want to let you know that the average of non-blacks, the average unemployment rate for non-blacks is 5%. So the percentage is more than doubled in black communities in Canada. But for the average for non-blacks is 5%. Something to really take into consideration. So when you're looking at why is it that I'm being fired, you know, from a job for no just cause, or why is it that I'm being workplace mobbed for no just cause? Please remember that the unemployment rate for Black Canadians is 12%. That's more than double than the average for non-Blacks, that is at 5%, which means that there is a deliberate and orchestrated plan to keep Black people out of the employment and labor in Canadian society nationally. So if you find that you're only able to stay in one position for 1 year, another position for 18 months, another position for 2 years, another position for, 3 months, there's a reason for that. It's to keep you from having stable employment. And then you're being held as a placeholder until a non-Black or white person fills in that position. Your skills get devalued during that time, and then you're being told that you have to now train your replacement. It's humiliation, it's degradation, it's denial of Canadian citizens, which is Black Canadians are Canadian citizens too. It's the denial of them being able to have a sustainable living wage in order to have their family live comfortably and be able to pass on wealth. Because when the percentage is this high, you don't have any discretionary funds. It is very hard to be able to maintain a lifestyle where you can pass money on to your children. It's impossible. And I'm going to go into how you are being stolen from. So how resources are being stolen from you to subsidize a white supremacist society. And that will go into accommodation. That will go into, a whole host of things. I mean, on average, Black people pay more in mortgage interest rates. Black people pay the most in car financing and or leasing. Black people pay the most if you are renting. Your rent is substantially higher, whereas ironically, if a white person was to apply for rent, they may get subsidized, they may get a discount. This was on CBC, where they had 3 young men apply for accommodation, and the white guy got a discount on his rent. So it was, I'll bring those up shortly, but I just want to let you know as to how the disruption leads to catastrophic and future events such as no pension, no retirement savings, because you're constantly having to move and you're not there long enough to reap the resources because you're being driven out of those positions on purpose to maintain that 12% unemployment rate or even more. So you are deliberately being kept out of the workforce. I'll provide more videos shortly.